Hi, I'm happy to give a very brief overview of some of the findings from the Dog Lab's research over the last 17 years. I welcome everyone to visit our homepage and find out more details about all the work that we have been doing. And I would like to begin by thanking all the wonderful people who are PhD students, master students, and then many who are interns who have worked with us over the last 17 years to make all of this work possible. Dogs and humans, of course, have a very special shared relationship which goes back at least 15,000 years. And we have created all these large number of breeds which go to 350 plus today through means of artificial selection, making them look, behave, feel like the ideal dog that we all want. This has led to low genetic diversity in the bred dog population who are raised and provided for by humans. And all the studies on dog behavior, cognition, physiology has primarily focused on these dogs. So we need to understand dogs in their natural environment, dogs who are more like the proto dogs who came to start living with humans early on. And that is the model system that free-ranging dogs spread out all over the global south provides us with high genetic diversity. They comprise of almost 70% of the world's modern day population of dogs. In India, there's a lot of discussion about dogs on streets and whether they have a right to be there, whether they should be removed from the streets, especially after last August's guideline by the Supreme Court and then a more recent follow-up on it, when it has been decreed that aggressive dogs and rabid dogs need to be removed from streets and euthanized in all public spaces like schools, colleges, hospitals, etc., need to be free of dogs. While on the one hand, there are a lot of people who are anti-dog, there are dogs who are in the news for their love for humans. There is Aluka, the peace dog. There is Kali, the dog who gave up its life to protect children from a poisonous snake in Orissa, and a pack of dogs who protected a newborn child which had been abandoned outside a public toilet on a wintry night. And the child was found to be alive because of their protection and care. In this context, we at the Dog Lab try to understand how dogs interact with each other, how dogs interact with humans, and how smart or what cognitive abilities do dogs have. And in trying to do it so, we are trying to put together the big picture of how, in the first place, dogs became man's best friend. I think it's important to highlight that dog mothers are very, very caring mothers. They start this care at the beginning when they are pregnant and they are trying to find an ideal place to give birth. We have found dens in all kinds of places, but what is important to highlight is unlike other urban animals who try to hide their babies from humans, dogs try to give birth close to humans that they're accustomed to, and the mothers try to use human given food or begging from humans actively while they are with their puppies. So that gives the pups protection, that gives the mother assured food, and gives them a den where they have the additional protection of friendly humans. As the pups grow older, the mother increases her investment in what we call passive care, where the care is there, but it is less energy intensive, like sleeping in a pile with the pups to keep them warm, or just cleaning their den, or just hanging around them for protection. And they reduce their investment in active care, like nursing them, actively grooming them all the time, or playing with them energetically. This is data collected over 5 years from 22 litters. And we found that the mothers showed different kinds of active and passive parental care behavior. But what is most important is the time when weaning happens is definitely by 14 weeks. There's variation, but at 14 weeks, no pups are being nursed by their mothers. Interestingly, Dogs live in large groups, large social groups or packs. And what we find is not only do the mothers give care, like in these 5 cases where the litters received only maternal care, there were cases when in these 3, when there was a male giving care in addition to the mother, and in these 3, where there was another female who was giving care in addition to the mother, and 10, where there was maternal care, care by a female relative, and care by a male adult. And these females who give care are either grandmothers, older siblings, or aunts. And the putative fathers, as we call them, just like we looked at maternal care when we saw the variation, for putative fathers too, we see that there are all kinds of caregiving behavior, not just protection. There's play, there's regurgitation of food, sometimes there's even grooming and offering of food. And statistically, what we find interesting is the mothers feed and fathers play. Those are the 2 primary behaviors in which mothers and putative fathers invest their time and energy towards the pups. Now, with all of this active care and family life, we expect the pups to do well in survival. But what we find, data from 95 litters and 364 pups showed us that survival decreases as the pups grow older. And the highest mortality occurs when they are about 4 months old, which is when they have weaned, they have become more or less independent of the mothers, and they are juveniles, or in human age connotation, they are more like teenagers. Why do the pups die? In the first month, it's natural mortality, more or less, but as they grow older, more and more deaths happen because of us. Either sometimes people, especially kids, carry away cute puppies, and their parents think once the puppies are a little older and able to feed, they release them because they think that the juveniles can take care of themselves, and these juveniles don't survive. And then, of course, there is active killing by humans, poisoning, and then there are accidents. Unfortunately, we are their biggest predators in the urban ecosystem. Dogs have to undergo decision making. Decision making is something that is actively studied in animal behavior, especially in the context of primates. It's a behavior when animals are weighing costs and benefits and taking a decision. Where do dogs take decision? Of course, in the context of foraging, but also whether to fight or flight in a situation, how to select the ideal site for resting, how to choose a mate, whether to be solitary or in a group, how to select the ideal den site, whether a human is a friend or a foe. And then there are all kinds of preferences. To eat or not to eat is a big decision because, as you see here, dogs have to find their food from all kinds of human leftovers. Not always do they find food on human plates like this. More often it is like this or like this. So there is food often mixed with garbage, which leads to a lot of olfactory noise. There is rotten food, there is fresh food, there is inedible food, there is preferred food, unpreferred food. So questions of palatability, preference, and taste take over. And then there are humans who are giving them food. So in this context, when we look at the scavenging scene over many experiments, what we found is they are the dominant active scavengers in the community, followed by myna birds. They seem to follow a rule of thumb: if it smells like meat, eat it. However, preference can be set aside in the face of competition. If the food is laced with lemon, they are not going to reject it, but try to reduce the citrusity in some way, and they seem to have a love for the color yellow. I switch gears and come to active dog-human interactions. Again, we have done a lot of studies in this respect. Here I'm showing you one in which we were trying to understand how well they recognize and remember a particular reward-giving person. So we start on day 1 with 2 people who are similar in body build and size and age, and they are calling out to the dogs. They're identically dressed. The dog, if it approaches and makes a choice, then whichever individual, in this case E1, the dog has chosen, E1 ignores the dog and E2 gives a reward to the dog. And then E2 gazes at E2, gazes at the dog. So then we say E1, which is the first choice of the dog, becomes my incorrect choice, or rather the dog's incorrect choice. And the second individual who now gives a reward should be the correct choice. And on the next day, day 2, until day 5, the same 2 experimenters come and stand and allow the dog to make a choice, and the correct and the incorrect choices remain the same. So every time the dog makes the correct choice and goes to the less preferred individuals as compared to day 1, the dog gets a reward. And what we find is it takes 4 days for the dog to learn and remember which is the reward giving person and switch its first choice to the reward giving person. However, the latency, the time taken for the dog to make the choice from the start of the experiment is high only on the first day. On all subsequent days, the dog quickly goes either to E1 or E2. So their learning happens fast, and within 4 days, they know which is the correct choice and always now go to the correct reward giving person. So they definitely recognize humans, and we have to keep in mind that these are experiments done with dogs who are encountering these experimenters for the very first time in their life on the first day of the experiment. So these are not familiar dogs, unlike in case of pets. And in another long-term 10-day-long experiment, when we have put together 2 people in the same context, but here one person gives a food reward, the another gives a petting reward, and the dog has to choose between the 2. We see only on day 1 the food giving person gets a preference, but on all other days the dogs choose equally between the food rewarder and the petting rewarder, which shows a very high value of petting as a reward for the dogs in building trust. So we tried to do a study through surveys to understand how adoptable are our street dogs, because every caregiver, every dog lover tries to say that adopt a dog, take it home. So are they adoptable? Are they good pets? Rubina carried out this study, and this was done in collaboration with UBC in Sasha Propotova's lab. And this was an online survey, recruitment primarily through social media. So people who had adopted a street dog, the dog had to be at least 6 months of age, and they must have stayed on with their owners for at least 3 months at the time of the survey, and the owners who responded to the survey had to be 18 years of age. Very simple rules. What we found was primarily female responders. That does not show that primarily females adopt dogs, but this is the sample that we got in the responses. Primarily Indians who were responding. The dogs which were adopted were majorly males. The sources were a small number received from friends or family, a small number adopted from shelters, but the majority of the dogs had been picked off the streets. When we put them through the CBARC survey, what we found, I'm just showing you the key results, that the scores were very high for attachment, excitability, energy, and chewing for the FRDs, and overall owner-directed aggression was low, and fear was low. Dog-directed aggression was higher for the dogs which were living internationally and dogs which were living in isolated bungalows rather than in apartments. When we looked at the MDOR scores for the adopted dogs, we found that owners said their perceived cost for maintaining these dogs was low, and their emotional closeness to the dogs and their interaction levels with the dogs were high, which suggested very high adoptability and for free-ranging dogs. So summing up our findings over the years about their relationships with us, we know that they are good at understanding human gestures like pointing, aggressive stances, friendly gestures. They trust easily when shown love. They adjust their behavior and activities, their day-to-day behavior also based on our activities. In crowded spaces, they behave differently. In less crowded spaces, they behave differently. Sudden human crowding changes their behavior, etc. Summing up the findings over the last 17 years, we can tell you that free-ranging dogs have active, complex social lives. Humans are a threat to their survival, but also a major source of their food and shelter. They have complex interactions with our species. They're good at understanding very many social gestures. Lifetime experience with humans probably shapes their personalities, and they have a huge behavioral plasticity, which also makes them good pets. I want to leave you with this question of should we play God, given that the streets are their home, we impact their lives deeply, and so we have a responsibility towards them, and they are an integral part of urban ecosystem. Can we coexist and let them be using scientific understanding of their behavior and give them better lives? Thank you to ICAM for this invitation and for you for listening. Thanks to all our funders and our group members, and of course to the dogs for being this wonderful model system. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.